Well, hello everyone. This is Greg Strobel here, CEO of HHAeXchange. I'm a white male, about 6 feet tall, with I'd say salt and pepper hair, as a description of myself. Before we introduce our guests here, Ellen and Emily Ladau, for today's fireside chat, I'd like to talk just a little bit about why we're here today. October is National Disability Employment Awareness Month, and it's held every October to commemorate and recognize the contributions of people with disabilities really to America's workplace and really in how they power our economy. If you flip the slide, please. Like I said, NDEAM, which is the acronym for, again, National Disability Employment Awareness Month, is every October, and it's really to recognize the contributions of millions of people with disabilities in America's workplace. And this year's theme is America's Recovery, Powered by Inclusion. And, what this is really doing from our perspective is reflecting the importance of ensuring that people with disabilities really do have full access to employment and community involvement during the national recovery from COVID. And we really are behind this, and we really support this mission. Next slide. That theme, powered by inclusion, I'd say, is so close to home for all of us at HHAeXchange. It really is connected to the mission that you see here on the page, the mission of, what we do every day, which is supporting individuals so that they can thrive and they can work in the comfort of their own homes as long as possible. And it connects to our core values of compassion, commitment, character, and confidence. And you can read our mission here and what we're so passionate about on a day in and day out basis. I'd say also, NDEAM's theme of inclusivity is also reflected in our recent shift, I'd say, to a remote workplace. With COVID, really back in March of 2020, I'm so proud of the fact that we were able to quickly pivot to ensure that our entire workforce could work remotely and offer a host of options to all of our employees, including any employee that has or had a disability. Lastly, I just want to say that in honor of NDEAM, we wanted to make a donation to a charity of Emily and Ellen's choice, and that charity is called Rooted in Rights. And let me talk about Rooted in Rights, because it really is so important. It's really aims to amplify the perspectives of the disability community, and really and the way it does that is by creating great digital and accessible content that helps to highlight the diverse experiences and contributions of this important part of our workforce and the disability community. So, with all that said, I want to kind of get out of the way here and hand it off to our own Christy Watson, who is our Vice President and General Manager in our Payer Solutions Group, who will formally introduce our guest speakers and who will also moderate today's fireside chat. So thank you, and off to you, Christy.
Thank you, everyone. Hello, my name is Christy Watson. I am a white woman with brown hair and wearing a black shirt sitting in front of my fireplace. I'm very excited to introduce our speakers today on a topic that's near and dear to my heart. Please welcome Ellen and Emily Ladau. Ellen and Emily are a mother-daughter duo that have the same physical disability as my son. It's called Larsen Syndrome. We have been connected in the same disability community for many, many years. One housekeeping item before I go into the introductions is that if you would like to view today in closed caption, please click the link in the chat and that will turn that on for you. Emily is an internationally known disability rights activist, writer, speaker, and recently published a book, Demystifying Disability, which I have really been enjoying reading. We have copies of this book in all of our offices. Ellen and Emily will speak about their experience of being disabled in America, how home care and support services have impacted them, and what the future looks like for the disability community. We will also have a Q&A at the end of today's session, so if you would like to ask a question, just please put it in the chat as you think about it, and we will address it at the end of the session. With that, I'll turn it over to Ellen and Emily, and you can start off. Please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, yes, thank you so much, Christy. It's amazing that after all these years, we have this opportunity. Just to introduce myself, I'm a white woman. I'm wearing a pink shirt, reddish brown hair, and glasses, and both Emily and I are seated in front of our fall decorated fireplace.
Hi, everyone. I'm Emily Ladau. I'm Ellen's daughter. I am also a white woman. I have brown hair pulled to the side in a ponytail, wearing glasses, a dark blue dress, and in between us, you can see a copy of Demystifying Disability.
Oh, one thing I should say is that may not be evident on camera is we're both sitting in our wheelchairs.
Yes, we are wheelchair users. I don't know if you can see that, but we indeed are.
Emily's in a manual wheelchair, and I'm in a power wheelchair.
Good catch.
I've listened to you do this enough. Okay, I guess back to you, Christy.
Great, so let's get into some discussion. As I've seen in my own son's life, who's 17 years old, the disability landscape in America has changed, even for him, and definitely significantly over the years. I'm curious to hear from both of you what it was like as you were growing up. I know as Ellen and Emily grew up in different decades. What has your experience been? Ellen, I'll kick it to you first.
Okay, well, I'm not afraid to admit that there's 30 years between Emily and I, and it was a very different experience for me growing up. Happily, I can report that. My brother also has Larsen Syndrome, and other than him, we only really saw one other disabled boy in our school. I was always the only, for a time, I was the only visibly disabled person in my school. And it was a very isolating experience. And back then there was no real attempt to integrate me into activities or adapt activities. I was always just the scorekeeper watching on the sidelines, never an active participant. And happily, I can report that for Emily, there was much more emphasis on adapting activities so she could be fully included as much as possible.
And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that my mom was born before the passage of the Americans with Disabilities Act, and I was born almost a year to the day after the passage of the Americans with Disabilities Act. And so while the law is certainly not the only thing that has created shifts, and we still very much are in need of a lot of attitudinal changes, I think I'm very lucky to have been born into a world where there was so much more attention on the fight for inclusion. And I recognize that a lot of the rights that, I don't take for granted, but that I enjoy are things that weren't in place when you were younger. And so
right, it was something as simple as ramps.
Right.
Because there weren't ramps for wheelchairs, you just didn't see a lot of disabled people out in public.
Whereas for me, ramps are, while we're still fighting for them in a lot of places,
right,
a form of access that has really become a mainstay. And so I can get around a lot more easily than you could. And I really do attribute that to, the passage of time and the hard work of disability activists.
Absolutely.
Great. I'll just add, so when my son went to preschool at a speech and hearing school, and the first 2 years, if they had a class upstairs, they actually carried him up. And by the time he was done, he was fully integrated into one of the Columbus Public School elementaries, where if you look at him today, there was a new high school built. It's completely ADA accessible. He has an elevator to get to the second floor. So I can even see, in public schools and just in his world, that the importance of having ADA compliant space is becoming more and more prominent. And I think that's great.
To show how much work needs to be done, Emily was not actually able to go to the neighborhood elementary school. Our district has 5 elementary schools. So she had to go to the one that was a little further from our house that was one level. Would you believe not? Maybe just a little over a year ago, we saw an article in the paper that they finally put an elevator in the elementary school that's closest to us.
30 years later.
Years. Absolutely. It's still a challenge, especially in the older buildings where there's not a lot of opportunity to update them. So as a follow-up, what's being done today that's most exciting to you? And how do you think it's paving the way for future generations?
I'm happy to take that. I think the most exciting thing to me has been that there's an incredible amount of momentum building within younger generations of people with disabilities, because we are able to connect with others through the internet. I know that, back in the day, if you will, you and my mother, Christy, connected back on MSN, was it?
MSN chat.
I think it was MySpace.
MySpace? Oh my goodness.
Yeah, a little bit of that too. Yeah, we keep trying to change our group as technology to our point here today. Yeah.
Always updating the technology. But right now we're at a very exciting turning point for the disability community, because people are able to connect with others who share their experiences and people who don't share their experiences who we can learn from. And so technology has really been, I think, the great opportunity for us to connect, to level the playing field in so many ways, to open up opportunities, to give us the power to work from home, to give us the power to enjoy social events from home. So I think what I am most excited about is honestly how the power of technology is really driving connection and progress.
I'll tell a really quick story. We all know today that Zoom means this platform, how we all can connect. When I was growing up, Zoom was a television show. And just coincidentally, one day I was flipping through TV Guide, which I don't even know is published now, and I saw an ad for the Zoom show featuring a young girl who had Larsen Syndrome. And that was just shocking to me. And in order to get in contact with her, we had to write a letter to the TV station in Boston. Boston had to contact her in California to see if she was willing to be in contact with me and my family. So you can just see how the technology of Zoom is such a different thing now.
And now you're friends on Facebook.
And now we're friends on Facebook.
So I think that is incredibly exciting. Whereas my mom happened upon somebody who looked like her, I can see people who look like me simply by going on the computer and engaging in conversation. And that's really powerful.
Yes.
Absolutely. Let's talk about your experience with home care aides. I understand both of you have experience in the home care space and with aides. What has it been like for you, and how critical are home care aides to your daily life?
Well, we don't have home care aides on a daily basis, but there unfortunately have been times where Emily's had surgeries where it was just too difficult for me to manage while my husband, her dad, wasn't home. When she was 17, she had major cervical spine surgery and she was in a halo for about 4 months. So we had to have an aide during the day. And also, unfortunately, this summer she took a fall and broke her leg and needed surgery. And again, we needed the help of home care aides. So it's critical. Before I had the home care in place after the accident, Emily went to a nursing facility for a couple days and she was miserable and the care was substandard, and it just speaks to the importance of allowing people to be in their home they're more comfortable, and, you know, the care is one-on-one, and it's so critical.
We are both such big advocates for home and community-based services, and without having access to care in a home environment, I think that we're often putting our health in jeopardy, our mental health in jeopardy. You know, we're not receiving access to what we need to thrive and to heal and to get better. And so while the experiences that led me to needing home healthcare aides were both difficult experiences, without having the home healthcare aides, they would have been, I think, significantly more challenging and difficult for both of us, especially because we're both disabled. But in terms of the home care that I do get on a regular basis, I have physical therapy 3 times a week, and she uses HHAeXchange software to tap in when she gets here and tap out when she leaves. And so it was really funny when we realized that, and we were like, hey, we're going to be speaking with them today. But she has been a mainstay in our lives since I was 15, so a decade and a half. And I've been having physical therapy since I was months old, right?
Yes, Emily has benefited from home care services basically since infancy, as she just said, and it just speaks to also the difference of 30 years. I always like to tell the really quick story that when I was about 10 or 11, I had surgery on my leg, and after the cast came off, my surgeon said, put a pocketbook or a bag on your foot, and every day put another rock from outside in it to build up your weight. And that was my physical therapy. And, you know, so there's a big difference in what home care was like, or non-existent pretty much.
Yeah, whereas for me, it's been so integral to maintaining my strength and my function and just getting through day-to-day life.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And even I think, you know, with Larsen syndrome, the disability is apparent physical disability. And it's so important to have those services in the home because, you know, it's not always easy to get out the wheelchair and the equipment and get somewhere and it's raining or you know, we have accessibility issues. And so as Jalen was growing up, he not only had, he had PT, OT, play therapy, speech therapy, hearing therapy, all coordinated also by a nurse that was in the home. And we couldn't have done that actually if it wasn't in the home. There was no way we could, you know, coordinate all of those appointments elsewhere. So I couldn't say it better, the testimony to home health and HCBS services and why it's important to make sure that people have the option to be in their homes and to heal in their homes. And I do see that there is more of a push for HCBS services as states continue to develop those programs. Before we get off the topic, I do want Ellen to just talk a little bit about your experience working in home care.
It's just very coincidental that when I was pregnant with Emily, I was managing a home care office. I was a home health care coordinator, and it was just fascinating to me now that I see the technology like that HHA offers. My technology was a pencil with an eraser. So I did.
And a telephone. You had a telephone.
Oh, I did have a telephone, but I didn't even have a computer in my office. So it's just, wow, the changes.
And I think it's a testament to the fact that there's been a societal push for understanding the value of home care. And that's what's led to these advancements, because I think we've realized that people thrive best in the environments that work best for them. And also, I'm lucky personally that you happen to work for a home healthcare agency, because you really knew the ins and outs and how to navigate, and
Right.
it can be challenging to navigate sometimes, you know.
Prior to home care, I worked in health insurance, so I definitely had the skill set to be an advocate for Emily, and I think I can say that she learned a lot of her advocacy skills advocacy skills from watching me do a lot of yelling at times.
Gentle yelling,
Gentle
polite yelling. No,
yes.
in all seriousness, though, I think a lot of people look at us, a disabled mother-daughter duo, and they say, what a tragedy, and how sad it must be. But for me, how lucky I am to have been born to somebody who just had this built-in knowledge of disability, of home health care, of health insurance. I mean, I hit the jackpot.
I hit the jackpot with you.
You know, it's funny that you say that, because I also, I kind of say that, you know, I also refer to myself as Mama Bear sometimes, because that is needed. And let's just wrap up this topic with talking about the complexity. What people at HHAeXchange may not understand is, in order to get home care, or the level of home care that you need, you know, that there is a lot to be done. There's prior authorizations at times. If you're working on a Medicaid waiver, there's a lot of, you know, hoops to jump through. But how do you think it's changing and improving, especially Ellen, from what you've seen, to the level of services that are offered to those that need it, and how they've changed the perception of that care?
Well, it was interesting because Emily was in the NICU for about 9
the neonatal intensive care unit.
Right, for about 10 days. And after she came home from the hospital, she was casted. Her legs were casted. And then out of the blue, I got a call from a public health nurse, and apparently any baby that was discharged from a NICU got this contact. And she started telling me that Emily was at a high risk of learning disabilities because children learn by movement, and she has a movement disability. And would I like to have her evaluated for services? And I was like, yes, you know, and there's any help that can be provided to her, absolutely. But I was like, I didn't even know that these services were available, because it's not something I had growing up. But like your son, she had PT, OT, and speech therapy.
Yeah.
And she went through the whole early intervention system, and eventually I let her go on a school bus to school when she was only 18 months old. And she definitely benefited from all those services.
I do want to clarify, you know, at the time when you got the phone call saying, oh, your daughter is at risk of learning disabilities, I don't think that there was that societal understanding that having a child with learning disabilities also doesn't need to be viewed as a tragedy. You know, there was this stigma and these stereotypes that drove a lot of the conversation around providing early intervention services. But really, you know, early intervention is just something that we should look at as beneficial. It doesn't necessarily need to change or fix who your child is. It just needs to be there, support, and give them the tools to live the best possible life that they can, and in their own body and in their own mind. And so I feel so lucky that I was, you know, set up with these services. And I think in a lot of ways, they are what I would credit to where I am now, because if I didn't have these early intervention services, I don't think that I would have physically been able to thrive in the way that I have. But at the same time, it's always a fight, right? It's always a fight to maintain these services. It's always a fight to keep them active, to justify why you need them. So there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes to maintain these services.
Right. It is a lot of work. And I ended up drafting a lot of letters of medical necessity, hand them to the doctor and say, here, please put this on your letterhead. And they were like, oh, thank you.
It's a full-time job.
Yeah.
It's a full-time job.
Is. Yeah. And I would say with my son, his pediatrician has been an activist for us in saying whatever you need. He's getting ready to go to his driving evaluation since he's 17 and ready to drive. And anything I need from the pediatrician, she has been a great partner for us over the years to get us to all the different services, because also even finding out what all those services are that are connected to home care and how to be, our best selves in the world. So yeah, I think that's great. And I agree that early intervention, now there's federal programs that are run by the states specifically for early intervention, detection, and prevention. And actually for HHAeXchange, we have some of those plans actually as payer clients. So we get to see how those plans operate also because they're required to do EVV. So we have been involved with those plans. And speaking of being involved in the plans from a technology basis, as a technology company, talk to us about how technology has impacted the way that you interact with the world.
Oh my gosh, I think technology has opened up the world for us in so many ways. And a lot of that has become even more evident during the experiences of the pandemic. So whereas disabled people have been advocating for years and years to have access to working remotely, to attending school remotely, to joining in on cultural events and socialization events through the computer. This was something that was denied previously and now has become the norm. So it's not that the pandemic
or given to a privileged few.
Right. It was in the beginning of the pandemic, everybody suddenly had access to this thing that used to be just limited to a few people who happened to have the privilege to be able to work from home. And so, for me, that's a very good point. For me, I had been advocating for myself and I had asked if I could work from home well before the pandemic, years before the pandemic, because I wasn't really driving at the time and I still wanted access to the workforce. And I'm very lucky to say that I had employers who were willing to accommodate me, but that was not the case for you. You stopped working, completely to care for me, and I don't want to speak for you, but I drive and my mother doesn't drive. Yeah. And so I think that really had an impact on your ability to work.
Well, that, and to Christy's earlier point, when you talked about accessibility to all these services like PT and OT and speech, if it wasn't home-based, I mean, how would I have been able to get Emily to those services? So, definitely filling a critical need. And I just wanted to mention one other thing. When you mentioned EVV, I didn't even know what it was.
Electronic visit verification.
Oh, thank you.
I know, I knew what it is now. I didn't know what it was before until Emily's physical therapist explained what she was doing. And I just want to say, when I was a home care coordinator, my version of EVV was making random phone calls to patients' houses to make sure that their healthcare provider was there. So again, that's how technology has just changed, and it enhances patient safety, it minimizes insurance fraud. So, game changer.
It allows us to do so much from the comfort and safety of our own homes that we weren't doing previously. And I understand that the pandemic has been difficult for so many, but as we begin to move into this recovery phase, as the theme says for National Disability Employment Awareness Month, I hope that we recognize that our recovery is powered by inclusion and that we don't lose this momentum that we've gained in making more inclusive virtual spaces for people.
Absolutely. So technology, when you talk about having to call the patient, right? And as a certified fraud examiner, I really have a passion for saving Medicaid dollars because they are limited and they are one of the largest budgets for each state to try to manage. And so if there is fraud, waste, or abuse in the system, those are dollars that can't go to actually providing services. So I'm very passionate about that. Also, technology, I'll just mention in our home, my son has a personal assistance device that he can push. So if I'm out in the woods or whatever, and he's here by himself, he has to make sure he has his necklace on that has an emergency call. Because, you know, if you're physically disabled and you get in an accident, you may not be able to get to the phone. That's the whole point. So there has been technology like that that also helps for people to stay in their homes when there's a risk of falls or something like that. I think what my son likes best about technology now is Larsen Syndrome. There is sometimes anomalies with the hands, and he has very short fingers, and he likes to type. And so, you know, now really at school, most of the time he's typing. Every once in a while he'll complain that he had to write a paper or write something with his hand, a pencil, you know. So that technology.
They teach cursive writing anymore.
That's right. Which is good, right? For him.
There's so much power in that, in being able to do what works best for you, because technology empowers you to do that. So if that's writing by hand, if that's typing, if that's using voice to text, dictation, also mentioning that your son has the necklace, you know, having the access to someone at the push of a button, but not always having to have someone right next to you, is a form of fostering independence. So, I mean, there's just so many worlds that technology has opened up for people with disabilities.
Absolutely. And then when we tie that with COVID and the pandemic and the way that it's changed how people work, because of technology, and you mentioned this before, Emily, one of the things that's most exciting to me about my son's future now is that many of the jobs that he would be interested in, he's interested in programming and coding and that type of thing, really, there's more potential that really would be a work at home job. And though he could get into an office, it's going to be a big part of his day physically to transition to an office and transition back home. Obviously, for all of us, there's a commute, but sometimes for the physically disabled, that commute actually is a big part of their day. And it's just really exciting to see a lot of companies, including HHAeXchange, really supporting fully the ability to work at home for a lot of reasons. But in the disability community specifically, I think it's going to lead to a lot of opportunity that may not have been there before. So if there is a silver lining to COVID, I think that's what it is. Go ahead.
No, I was just absolutely so relieved when Emily had, you know, after college, the initial, the ability to work at home, because I just couldn't imagine her being a daily commuter dealing with the Long Island Railroad and, unfortunately, potentially the New York City subway system, which is notorious for elevators not working. So that just really made me so nervous. So it definitely was a relief.
Yeah, and the other thing is, you know, Greg mentioned rooted in rights before. And, you know, I really appreciate that HHAeXchange was kind enough to provide a generous donation to Rooted in Rights. My response here is twofold, though. You know, first of all, Rooted in Rights is based in Seattle and I'm based in New York. So I'm working remotely for them, which is incredible. But more to the point is we just published a blog post that I really encourage everyone to read about someone who is currently embroiled in a battle over receiving the proper access to home care services that she needs so that she can get to and from the workplace. Because without having that home care in the morning to get you ready to go to work to start the day, you know, how are you going to get to work? So of course, working at home is an option, indeed a silver lining of COVID, but at the same time, home care also does empower people to leave their homes.
Right.
And so I think we need to celebrate it from both angles.
Absolutely. Now, we've talked a lot about helping those with disability, but let's talk about, you know, your views on how you see people with disabilities helping others. I mean, you guys help each other, you know.
That's a great question.
I'm so happy to flip the script on this conversation, because there's this misunderstanding that disability means that you are helpless, that you're not able to provide support for other people. And it doesn't matter whether you have a cognitive disability or a physical disability or a mental health disability. You are a human being who in some way can provide support for someone else. And so although my mother and I are both wheelchair users, we help each other constantly. And my dad is the one who is not physically disabled, but many times we have to help him too. We have found so many ways to be of support to each other, whether it's emotional support or whether it's me putting on my mom's shoes or her putting on my socks or us helping each other pick something up off the floor. You know, we have found a dynamic that works for us.
Just before we came on here, some water fell on the floor and we're both trying to clean it up. That was pretty comical.
It's really never a dull moment. You know, I'm trying to rush to get my shoes on. She's trying to get towels on the floor. We're just a constant moving circus, but we're always helping each other. And I think we need to recognize that as human beings, we can all find ways to do that.
Absolutely. And go ahead, Ellen.
Oh, I just think that people think that, you know, my husband is sometimes referred to as Saint Mark.
And we are the burdens
and
to
we
him.
are the burdens to him. And there needs to be recognition of all the things that we do to help him. I mean, I'm the house manager, the bill payer, the scheduler. I mean,
the cook, the cleaner, the laundress,
you know. So, how would he manage without all those supports? I mean, of course, that it depends on everybody's level of disability to how much they are able to assist others, but there should be recognition that, you know, and value to whatever anybody can contribute to their life.
And I think sometimes people assume when someone has a disability, sometimes they're not good at anything, right? Jalen's very smart. He has to help his younger brother keep his stuff together, get where he needs to go, get his homework done. And I think that sometimes, and what I would say to everyone, is really understanding that a disability is not, and Emily, you talk about in the book, it doesn't define everything about you. It is one thing about you. I think you said like the pizza, right? And everybody has a crust and how that pizza is built. So when Jalen was, I think 4 or 5, we signed him up for the Miracle League, which is a national baseball program. And the thing that I noticed is the number of people that wanted to come out and help. They had volunteers that went out on the field with each kid or helped them bat, and coaches and people from the community. And, you know, one good thing I think with Jalen and living in the small town that we do, it does give people a chance to rally about and be kind and show kindness to him and be helpful. When I asked him if he needed an aid in his classroom one year, he said, no, if I drop my pencil or something, a friend will just get it for me. And I thought, you know, that's great, right? That he has that expectation that those around him can help and be kind and help him be part of the community. So.
Emily did have an aide from elementary school through middle school, and she just kind of put her foot down one day and said, I don't want this anymore. And she arranged to have a meeting, and then we just basically, each class she had a friend that would help her leave a few minutes earlier, so she just wasn't having to navigate a crowded hallway. And
the power of helping each other out.
Exactly, the power.
Absolutely. And Emily, you talk about that in your book too. It's like, you know, actually, if you read the book, it gives you some good guidelines if you may be a little timid about approaching or speaking to someone with disabilities because you don't know what the right way is. But what I would just encourage, and what you encourage in the book, just try it. Reach out. If you see someone, actually, we were coming back from a concert the other night, and there was a woman in a wheelchair, power wheelchair, there, and it was Harry Styles. There was a big mob of people trying to leave the arena. And I said, would you like me to go in front of you and just kind of clear the way a little bit? Would that help you? And she said, oh, thank you. But I think I'll be good. I'll just, kind of go with the flow here. So just asking someone, hey, would you need some help? They'll be very happy to say yes or no, or what you can do to help them. So one last question before we take questions from everyone. If you could change one myth or misconception about people with disabilities, what would it be?
Gosh, I wish I could make a whole list. I really do. But if I had to change one misconception, it would be the belief that people with disabilities can't be full and equal members of society. I think that we have these expectations that you have to do certain things in order to be defined as living a full life. You have to go to school, you have to have a relationship, a job, get married, have children, right? We have all these standards and ideas of what it means to live a full life. And we don't realize that no matter what kind of life you're living and no matter what your disability may or may not be, you can still live a full life. It doesn't have to look like anybody else's definition of a full life, but you are still a full and equal human being. You still have the right to full participation in society, to communicate in whatever way works best for you. And so I really wish that we would do away with this idea that being disabled means you can't live a full life.
And to Emily, to augment Emily's point, there may be so many people around you that have disabilities that are contributing, and you're just not aware of it because their disability is not a visible one. They could have some illness or mental health disability. You can't make assumptions about people, just like they say when you see a person using an accessible parking space and they have the placard, and a lot of times people will say, well, that person doesn't look disabled. Why are they taking that spot? You don't know.
You don't. Oh my gosh. Yeah, that is absolutely a misconception that I want to do away with. You cannot look at somebody and necessarily determine anything about their disability status, and nobody owes you their story. As much as I am a big believer in storytelling and communication, nobody owes you that.
Not everybody is willing to sit for Zoom sessions and talk about their life.
We're happy to do it.
We're happy to do it. And I'm so thrilled that, Christy and I have been in contact for years and supported each other.
Absolutely. So I think that's the end of the questions that I wanted to make sure we asked. And it looks like we have some really good questions from our team at HHAeXchange. One thing I want to ask and answer that I saw in the chat is, well, why did we describe ourselves? Or Emily, you would be the best. When we introduced ourselves, we made sure that we gave the physical description. We made sure that we had closed captioning for today. So talk about a few of those things and how that helps with these types of discussions that we're having.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm sorry that we didn't give that context before, but great question. So the reason that we gave an audio description of ourselves is because it's the best practice to model. If somebody has a visual impairment or if somebody is blind, it's really important that you share a little bit of context of what they would be looking at or what is on the screen so that they have full access to participate in the same way as everybody else. And for that matter, if somebody's dialing in via phone, they can't see us either. So it's really just a good practice to say, hey, this is what we look like. This is who you're hearing from, and this is the setting behind us. So that's one really good way to create access and be a good ally to the disability community. And then in regard to having captions, that really helps a lot of people who have hearing disabilities. It also helps people who may have disabilities that cause them to have difficulties with processing, verbal communication. And sometimes it's just helpful if you missed what someone said. So again, accessibility helps everybody.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. So when we were talking about technology, someone asked, what is your favorite technology you use every day?
My favorite technology, you know what? I'm going to say my wheelchair, because I think that people look at wheelchairs as binding, as confining. They see it as something that is so sad that someone needs to be in. But I have always argued that my wheelchair is my freedom. Without it, I would not be able to move around the world. And so I think that the invention of the wheelchair is honestly the best technology there is when it comes to moving around for me.
Particularly, she's in her manual chair right now, but particularly a power chair. I mean, I can provide a show with this chair, which I realize I'm very lucky to have, but my chair goes up so I can reach high things. My chair tilts back, so if I need to just change positions. And so definitely the wheelchair enables my life. So I thought you were going to say cell phone though. Look, I'm glued to all day long.
Look, I love my cell phone. I love my cell phone. I am a millennial. You caught me. But I think my wheelchair is a better answer.
I agree. That is a great answer.
The wheelchair is what gets me around.
Yeah, great question.
Yeah, and I would say what we use every day too is like on Netflix and such, the subtitles. We use them so much that when my daughter moved out, she's like, I can't go without them either. And if Jalen's watching and for some reason we're watching something or someone's, on a new platform and he's like, hey, can we get the subtitles on? So that's the one that we use every day. And he obviously is on his computer and phone all day long. So we don't even have to mention that. So here's a good question for both of you. What are the main goals you'd like to accomplish over the next year or so?
Oh my goodness. That's a tough one. For me, and I always worry that people will think that this is kind of a cop-out answer, but I always say that my biggest goal is to keep doing what it is that I am doing, what it is that we are doing together, and to keep scaling and to keep growing and to keep connecting with more people. I am of the belief that if you connect with one person and you change one mind at a time, you're still having a ripple effect and you're still making a difference. And so if in a year from now, what I've accomplished is that I've reached more people, that will be absolutely achieving my goal.
And I hope to just support Emily. I'm sort of the behind the scenes momager, and I thought I created that word and was very disappointed when I found out one of the Kardashians.
It's the Kardashian term, the momager.
I work behind the scenes. I work with Emily and just support her so that her message reaches as large an audience as possible. And I think that.
And your message.
And my message, that it is possible to be a disabled parent.
Yeah.
There's a whole other topic. I've done some writing for the Disabled Parenting Project, which is based at Brandeis University. So, there's a belief out there that people with disabilities can't be parents, and in some cases, children are taken away from disabled parents. So there's just a whole breadth of knowledge about the disability experience that people need to know about. And her book is that starting point. And so excited that
she's being my momager.
I'm being the momager. Look, everybody, here's the book.
Well, and Ellen, we talk about that you came up with I love Emily's blog. It's called Words I Wheel By. And Ellen, you were saying you kind of helped her come up with that. I think that's great.
100% she did. It was all her.
Yeah.
Love it. So in regards to home health care, is there anything in particular you feel still needs work with government, with accessibility, with technology? What would be the one thing that you hope in the short term here that we can get right as a
I think
national community?
Oh, I have one too.
All right,
we're both passionate about this.
I think that pay for home care providers is a big issue, and if they don't have adequate pay, then they can't afford reliable transportation. That is an area that really needs to be addressed on a national level.
Yes, equitable pay. Oh my gosh. Home healthcare providers do so much to make life better for so many people. they deserve equitable pay. Absolutely. And for me, my focus is really on policy and the fact that, you know, home and community-based services are quite literally a huge part of federal ongoing conversations right now in terms of funding provision. And I hope that, you know, we continue to push in the right direction to ensure that we have the proper funding to keep providing services based in the home so that people don't have to go into nursing facilities.
Absolutely.
Here's a good question. Do you have any recommended resources for those who are unsure of how to advocate for themselves, especially in professional settings?
Oh, great question. So, you know, I think that it really helps to have the tools and the knowledge in place that you need to explain why you might need a certain accommodation or to disclose your disability or your experiences in a way that feels, you know, safe and comfortable to you. And a lot of that has to do with feeling like you're in a workplace culture where you are comfortable being your full self and bringing your full self to work. But at the same time, a lot of it is just about having the information that you need. And so 2 resources that I really, really like are the Job Accommodations Network. I believe it's AskJan.org. I also really like the Employer Assistance and Resource Network on Disability Inclusion, which has a ton of resources that make it easier for both employers and employees to talk about the accommodations and the ways to make workplaces more inclusive. The Job Accommodations Network has information on all types of different workplace accommodations. And there's this misconception that accommodations are often very expensive, but most of them can be done for, you know, low cost or free, and really are just about making the workplace more effective to be the most productive employee you can be. And then, of course, if you're looking for information on the Americans with Disabilities Act or on laws, there's also the Americans with Disabilities Technical Assistance Network, which is a really great resource. So there's a lot out there. And when you arm yourself with that information, that's how you begin to become your own best advocate.
That's great. And speaking of that and job, have you guys ever had job coaching supports, or do you think specifically for those that should be something that employers offer if needed?
So I think we might have missed a little bit of what you were saying. Can you share that again?
Oh yeah, sorry. So, you know, when we're talking about employment and advocating, have you had job coaching supports in the past, or do you think that is something that should be offered to those looking in the disability community to get employment, seek employment, and to obtain jobs? Is coaching needed?
So I've not personally used job coaching services professionally, unless you count my mother, who's got to be my biggest job coach.
Well, you did have contact with a vocational rehabilitation
right. That was what I was going to say.
Yeah.
So I've not, but job coaching as in having someone who is with me physically on the job.
Oh, okay.
I've not experienced that, but I very much benefited from vocational rehabilitation services, which supported me in the early years of searching for a job, and also supported me in the process of navigating things like learning how to drive, which was at the time considered a goal so that I could become employed, although we now know that working remotely is an option.
Right.
Yeah, so I think that access to job coaching is incredibly powerful. And if it's something that somebody needs to help them thrive in the workplace, then we should absolutely be making that available.
All right, so we have 5 minutes left. I do want to make sure that I say again that Emily's book, people are asking on the questions, what can I do, or what can we as a society do to be better and to do better? And I would say educating yourself, and this is a great place to start. This book is available definitely at your local bookseller, which I know we all like to support local businesses, but also on Amazon. I've seen a thing in Target. So many places to pick up the book. We have them in the offices. If you really want one, I can send you a copy too. Make sure you get that book. It's also available as an ebook and an audio book to make sure that those with visual impairments or you know, just any which way to be able to easily access the book. And there is also a plain language version available at emilyladau.com. I just want to say, so happy to get to interact with you guys in this way today. We have so many comments in the chat saying how wonderful it's been and how great you guys are. And we really appreciate the time. I just want to end here with allowing both of you to have any closing comments that you want to have out to our employees here at HHAeXchange. And you have about 3 minutes to do that.
No pressure. I will say, you know, Christy, thank you so much for shouting out my book as a resource. And the caveat that I always give is that I am one person and it is one book. And my hope is that it will be a starting point, or it will be a point on your learning journey about disability. But my hope is that you continue learning, you continue growing, that you recognize that the disability experience encompasses a population of 1.3 billion people worldwide. And so we are two of those people, and we cannot speak to every experience, but what we can do is offer a starting point to enter into these conversations and to begin to feel more comfortable having these kinds of dialogues. And so it's been such an honor to start this conversation. I welcome you to continue the conversation by checking out Demystifying Disability, but then know that there are a bunch of resources in the back so that you can keep your learning going, because that's the way that we can do our best to support the disability community, is simply by continuing to learn and engage, just like we were doing today.
And I would just say, Christy, I'm just so thankful that we've had the opportunity to know each other and support each other all these years through the magic of the internet. And I'm so happy that you reached out to us and that your company values this type of conversation.
Absolutely.
Because it all has to start with people being open to learning and to talk about these issues that are not talked about in general. So thank you so much for reaching out to us.
What a great step in the right direction.
Yes, it's been
absolutely. Well, thank you both. Also, if you go to the Rooted in Rights website, you will see Emily in a video there. Check that out. That's another great place that HHA has donated to, and as the choice of Emily and Ellen. Thank you all for being with us. I hope this is the beginning of your journeys if you haven't been engaged. And I would just say to end it, be kind, because you don't know what people are going through. You don't know if someone is struggling with a disability that's not apparent. We all have things that we're going through, and the best advice I could give is to be kind to everyone you encounter. So thank you all for joining. We appreciate you hanging out with us for this hour, and look forward to continuing the conversation within HHAeXchange. Reach out to me if you have any questions also about Jalen's experience and our experience as a family in disability. Thank you all.
Also, feel free to reach out to Emily or myself.
Find us online.
Yes.
Absolutely. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.